The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the endless stretch of Highway 66. The remote road wound through desolate landscapes, a thin ribbon of asphalt cutting through the wilderness. It was a lonely route, one that few dared to travel after dark, for the highway held secrets that whispered through the wind and danced in the shadows. Truck stops and diners dotted the roadside, offering brief respites for weary travelers. In one such diner, the regulars spoke in hushed tones about the vanishing hitchhiker. Legends told of a spectral figure, a young man in outdated clothes who appeared out of nowhere, thumb extended, seeking a ride from unsuspecting drivers. Those who picked him up rarely spoke of their experience afterward, but the few who did were never the same. Jack Harris, a seasoned long-haul trucker, brushed off the tales as mere superstition. He had driven countless miles through the darkest nights and harshest weather, facing far more tangible dangers than ghost stories. As he finished his coffee and paid the check, the elderly waitress, Sally, gave him a knowing look. "Be careful out there, Jack," she warned, her voice trembling slightly. "They say the hitchhiker's been seen again. Last week, one of our regulars picked him up. Poor guy hasn't been right since." Jack chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "You worry too much, Sally. Ghosts don't scare me. I've got enough real problems to deal with." Sally's expression remained grave. "Just remember what I said. Some things out there aren't meant to be understood." With a nod, Jack headed out into the cooling night air. His truck, an imposing beast of metal and chrome, awaited him in the parking lot. He climbed into the cab, the familiar smell of diesel and worn leather enveloping him. With a turn of the key, the engine roared to life, and he pulled back onto the highway, leaving the comforting glow of the diner behind. The road ahead stretched out like a dark ribbon, illuminated only by the truck's headlights. Jack's mind wandered as he drove, thoughts of his next delivery mingling with the eerie tales he had just heard. He shook his head, chiding himself for letting the stories get to him. But as the hours passed and the night grew deeper, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. It was past midnight when he saw the figure. A young man stood by the side of the road, thumb extended, eyes pleading. He wore a leather jacket and jeans, his hair tousled as if he had been out there for hours. Jack slowed down, rolling to a stop beside him. The hitchhiker approached, and as he climbed into the cab, Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "Thanks for stopping," the hitchhiker said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been out here all night." Jack nodded, forcing a smile. "No problem. Where are you headed?" "Just down the road," the hitchhiker replied, staring straight ahead. "Not far." The miles passed in silence, the hitchhiker's presence a heavy weight in the cab. Jack glanced at him occasionally, noting the pallor of his skin and the vacant look in his eyes. A sense of dread grew with each passing minute. Suddenly, the hitchhiker turned to Jack, his eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made Jack's blood run cold. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Not really," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why do you ask?" The hitchhiker's lips curled into a chilling smile. "Because sometimes they believe in you." In an instant, the hitchhiker vanished. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he swerved to the side of the road, bringing the truck to a screeching halt. He looked around frantically, but the cab was empty. The ghostly figure had disappeared as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving only an overwhelming sense of terror in his wake. Jack sat there for what felt like an eternity, the darkness pressing in around him. He knew then that the stories were true. The vanishing hitchhiker was real, and he had just come face to face with the horror that haunted Highway 66. The eerie silence of the deserted highway enveloped Jack as he struggled to process what had just happened. His hands trembled on the steering wheel, and he could feel his pulse pounding in his temples. The hitchhiker's words echoed in his mind. Because sometimes they believe in you. Jack forced himself to take deep breaths, trying to steady his nerves. He couldn't stay parked on the side of the road forever. With a shaky hand, he shifted the truck into gear and resumed his journey, though the once familiar road now seemed fraught with unseen dangers. Back at the diner, Sally's words haunted him. Some things out there aren't meant to be understood. Jack had always prided himself on his skepticism, but what he had just experienced defied any logical explanation. He needed to make sense of it, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. The next day, Jack found himself at a local bar, nursing a beer and replaying the events of the previous night in his mind. The bar was dimly lit, with a handful of patrons scattered around, lost in their own thoughts. Jack felt a strange sense of camaraderie with these strangers, as if they too harbored their own dark secrets. Jack Harris, right? A voice interrupted his thoughts. Jack looked up to see a man in his early 30s, dressed in jeans and a plaid shirt, approaching his table. He had a rugged look about him, with a hint of weariness in his eyes. "Yeah, that's me," Jack replied cautiously. "Do I know you?" The man extended his hand. "Name's Tom. I've heard about what happened to you last night. Sally told me." Jack shook his hand, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "I don't know what to make of it. One minute he was there and the next, he was gone." Tom pulled up a chair and sat down, leaning in conspiratorially. "You're not the first to see him, Jack. I've been hearing stories about that hitchhiker for years. People pick him up, and then something terrible happens. Accidents, disappearances, you name it." Jack's heart sank. "So it's not just a ghost story?" Tom shook his head. "No, it's real. I used to think it was just a bunch of nonsense, but then it happened to my brother. He picked up the hitchhiker a few months ago. A week later, he drove his car off a bridge. No reason, no explanation." Jack's stomach churned. "What can we do? How do we stop it?" Tom's expression grew grim. "That's the thing. No one knows how to stop it. But there might be someone who can help. There's a reporter named Sarah Evans. She's been investigating the hitchhiker for a while now. If anyone can figure this out, it's her." Jack nodded, a glimmer of hope piercing through his fear. "How do I find her?" "She's staying at the motel on the edge of town," Tom replied. "I can take you there." Later that evening, Jack and Tom stood outside a nondescript motel, the neon sign flickering in the twilight. They approached room 12 and knocked on the door. Moments later, it creaked open, revealing a woman in her late 20s with dark hair and sharp, inquisitive eyes. "Sarah Evans?" Jack asked. "Yes, that's me," she replied, her gaze shifting between Jack and Tom. "Can I help you?" Tom stepped forward. "This is Jack Harris. He had an encounter with the hitchhiker last night. We were hoping you could help us figure out what's going on." Sarah's eyes widened slightly and she stepped aside, gesturing for them to come in. "I've been waiting for someone like you, Jack. Someone who's experienced it firsthand. Please, come in. We have much to discuss." As they entered the small, cluttered room, Jack felt a sense of urgency mixed with anticipation. Together, they would unravel the mystery of the ghostly hitchhiker and perhaps find a way to end the curse that plagued Highway 66. Sarah's motel room was a chaotic labyrinth of newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes pinned to every available surface. A large map of Highway 66 dominated one wall, marked with various pins and annotations. Jack and Tom exchanged uneasy glances as they took in the scene. "Welcome to my research hub," Sarah said with a wry smile. "It's not much, but it's where the magic happens." Jack stepped closer to the map, noting the concentration of pins along a particular stretch of the highway. "These are all the sightings?" Sarah nodded, joining him by the map. "Every red pin represents a reported encounter with a hitchhiker. The blue pins are accidents and disappearances linked to those sightings. It's a disturbing pattern." Tom crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. "How long have you been working on this?" "Almost 3 years," Sarah replied, her tone grave. "I first heard about the hitchhiker while covering a series of mysterious accidents. The more I dug, the more I realized there was something connecting them all." Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the map. "What have you found out so far?" Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Not as much as I'd like. The hitchhiker seems to appear at random, though, always along this specific stretch of Highway 66. Witnesses describe him the same way every time. Young, disheveled, wearing a leather jacket and jeans. He vanishes without a trace, and then something terrible happens to the person who picked him up." Tom leaned against the wall, his expression grim. "So we're dealing with a ghost that's somehow cursed." Sarah nodded. "That's my theory, but I believe there's more to it. There must be a reason why he's stuck on this highway, why he targets certain people. If we can understand that, maybe we can find a way to stop him." Jack felt a surge of determination. "What do we do next?" Sarah's eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and resolve. "We need to talk to the survivors. There aren't many, but those who have had encounters and lived to tell the tale might have crucial information. And we need to dig into the history of this highway. Something happened here to create this curse." Over the next few days, Jack, Tom, and Sarah embarked on a relentless quest for answers. They traveled up and down Highway 66, visiting small towns and interviewing anyone who had experienced the hitchhiker firsthand. Each story added another piece to the puzzle, though none provided a clear solution. In a dimly lit bar in a dusty town, they met Carol, a middle-aged woman with haunted eyes. She spoke in a hushed voice, recounting her encounter with the hitchhiker years ago. "He just appeared out of nowhere," Carol said, her voice trembling. "I picked him up because he looked so lost, so desperate. But the moment he got in my car, I knew something was wrong. His eyes, they were empty, like he was looking right through me." Jack listened intently, feeling a kinship with her fear. "What happened after he disappeared?" Carol's hands shook as she took a sip of her drink. "A week later, my husband died in a car crash. It was sudden, no explanation. I know it sounds crazy, but I think the hitchhiker had something to do with it." Sarah took careful notes, her mind racing. "Thank you, Carol. Your story is important. We're trying to find a way to stop this from happening to anyone else." As they left the bar, Sarah turned to Jack and Tom. "There's a pattern here, but we need more. We need to find out who this hitchhiker was before he became a ghost." There's something tying him to this place. Their investigation led them to the local library, where they pored over old newspapers and public records. Late one night, Sarah stumbled upon a breakthrough. An article from the 1950s detailed a tragic accident on Highway 66. A young man named Daniel Hawkins had been killed in a hit-and-run incident. His body was found by the roadside, but the driver was never identified. "Daniel Hawkins," Sarah muttered, her eyes scanning the article. "This could be our hitchhiker." Jack peered over her shoulder. It fits. But why would he be targeting random drivers now? Sarah's eyes darkened with determination. That's what we need to find out. We need to know more about Daniel, his life, and his death. If we can understand his story, we might find a way to break the curse and put his spirit to rest. With renewed resolve, they set out to uncover the truth behind Daniel Hawkins' tragic fate. Little did they know, the deeper they dug into the past, the closer they would come to the darkness that still haunted Highway 66. The following days were a blur of research and discovery, as Jack, Tom, and Sarah delved into the dark history of Highway 66. They scoured archives, interviewed locals, and pieced together a narrative that had been buried by time and fear. Their first breakthrough came from an elderly man named Mr. Peterson, who had lived in the area all his life. Over a cup of tea in his cluttered living room, he shared his memories of the highway's construction. "Highway 66 wasn't always here," Mr. Peterson began, his voice shaky but clear. Back in the late 1940s, they decided to build the road to connect the small towns in this region. The construction crews ran into trouble almost immediately. Sarah leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad. "What kind of trouble?" Mr. Peterson's eyes darkened. The land they were building on. It was an old burial ground. The local Native American tribes warned them not to disturb it, but the foreman wouldn't listen. Said it was just superstition. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. What happened next? Strange things started happening, Mr. Peterson continued. Workers went missing. Equipment broke down for no reason, and some said they saw apparitions in the night. Then one day, a young man named Daniel Hawkins was found dead by the roadside. They said it was a hit and run, but there were no tracks, no witnesses. Sarah's eyes widened. Daniel Hawkins? The same name we found in the article? Mr. Peterson nodded. Yes, ma'am. After his death, things got worse. The project was eventually abandoned, and the highway wasn't completed until years later, when new crews came in. But by then, the damage was done. That stretch of road was cursed. Armed with this new information, the trio headed to the local library, determined to uncover more about Daniel Hawkins and the cursed burial ground. They spent hours sifting through old records, finding fragments of stories and half-forgotten legends that painted a picture of a troubled past. Daniel Hawkins had been a young man with a promising future. He was well-liked in the community, known for his kindness and his dreams of leaving the small town for a better life. But those dreams were cut short when he died under mysterious circumstances. The lack of a proper investigation and the town's eagerness to move on only added to the sense of injustice surrounding his death. As they dug deeper, they found accounts of strange occurrences along the highway even before its official construction. Local folklore spoke of restless spirits and vengeful ghosts, their anger stirred by the desecration of sacred land. It seemed that Daniel's death had somehow intensified the curse, anchoring his spirit to the highway and unleashing a cycle of terror. Sarah laid out their findings in her motel room, pinning up new clippings and notes. "We need to find a way to communicate with Daniel's spirit," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of their task. "If we can understand what he wants, maybe we can help him find peace." Jack nodded, though his heart was heavy with doubt. "But how do we do that? We've seen how dangerous he can be." Tom, who had been silent for much of the discussion, finally spoke up. "There's an old ritual I've heard of. It's risky, but it might work. It involves using personal items of the deceased to call their spirit and ask them what they need to move on." Sarah's eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and fear. "Do you know what we need?" Tom nodded. "We'll need something that belonged to Daniel, something that held significance to him. And we'll need to perform the ritual at the site of his death." With a new plan in place, they set out to find a memento of Daniel Hawkins. Their search led them to an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town, where Daniel had lived with his family. The house was a crumbling ruin, long since overtaken by nature. Inside, they found relics of a life cut tragically short: old photographs, a dusty baseball glove, and a locket with a picture of a young woman inside. "This must have been his girlfriend," Sarah said softly, holding up the locket. "It's perfect for the ritual." As they left the farmhouse, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the landscape. The final piece of the puzzle was in place, and they were one step closer to confronting the ghostly hitchhiker. But as night fell, the air grew heavy with foreboding. They knew that the true test was yet to come, and the darkness that awaited them on Highway 66 was more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. The night air was thick with tension as Jack, Tom, and Sarah gathered by the side of Highway 66. The ritual was set to take place at the very spot where Daniel Hawkins had met his tragic end. The site was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant rustling of leaves in the breeze. The trio prepared for the ceremony, their hearts heavy with anticipation and fear. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a ghostly light over the scene. Sarah laid out the items they had gathered from Daniel's old farmhouse: the baseball glove, a few photographs, and the locket. Tom recited the words of the ancient ritual, his voice steady despite the underlying tremor. "We call upon the spirit of Daniel Hawkins," Tom intoned, "to reveal to us the cause of his unrest and to show us how we might help him find peace." At first, nothing happened. The silence seemed to stretch into eternity, broken only by the occasional chirp of a distant cricket. Jack began to wonder if they had made a mistake, if all of this was in vain. But then, the temperature plummeted, and a thick fog began to swirl around them, carrying with it a palpable sense of dread. A shadowy figure emerged from the mist, its form gradually taking shape. The ghostly apparition of Daniel Hawkins stood before them, his eyes filled with a sorrow that seemed to echo through time. Jack's breath caught in his throat as he looked into the hollow eyes of the spirit, feeling an overwhelming sense of pity and fear. "Why do you torment the living?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling but determined. "What do you want?" The ghostly figure remained silent for a moment, then spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the depths of the grave. "I seek justice," Daniel said, his words echoing in the stillness. "I was wronged, and my soul cannot rest until the truth is known." Tom stepped forward, holding the locket in his outstretched hand. "We want to help you, Daniel. Tell us what happened." The ghost's form flickered, as if struggling to maintain its presence. "I was murdered," he said, his voice filled with pain. "Not by a hit and run, but by someone who wanted to silence me, I saw something I shouldn't have. Something that threatened powerful people in this town. They made it look like an accident, but I know the truth." Sarah's mind raced, connecting the dots. "Who did this to you, Daniel? Who needs to be brought to justice?" The ghostly figure began to fade, his strength waning. "The foreman of the construction crew," Daniel whispered. "He was involved in illegal activities. I found out, and they killed me to keep it quiet. Find the evidence, and you will find the truth." As Daniel's spirit dissipated into the night, the fog lifted, and the oppressive chill began to fade. Jack, Tom, and Sarah stood in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of what they had just witnessed. "We need to find that evidence," Jack said, breaking the silence. "It's the only way to end this." Over the next few days, they scoured the town's archives and interviewed anyone who might have information about the construction crew and the foreman. Their investigation led them to a retired worker named Bill, who had been part of the original highway project. Bill was hesitant at first, but eventually the trio convinced him to talk. They met him at his small, cluttered home, where he shared his memories over a pot of strong coffee. "Daniel was a good kid," Bill said, his voice filled with regret. "He got mixed up in something he didn't understand. The foreman, Frank Turner, was running a smuggling operation, using the construction as a cover. Daniel found out and tried to go to the authorities. They never gave him a chance." "Do you know where we can find any evidence?" Sarah asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Bill nodded. "There's an old shed near the site where Daniel died. Frank used it to store his records and contraband. It's probably still there, forgotten by time." Armed with this new information, Jack, Tom, and Sarah made their way to the shed. It was hidden among overgrown brush and fallen trees, a relic of a dark past. Inside, they found a trove of old documents and ledgers, detailing the illegal activities that had led to Daniel's murder. They took the evidence to the local authorities, who were initially skeptical but couldn't ignore the overwhelming proof. An investigation was launched, and Frank Turner was arrested, finally answering for his crimes. As the news spread, the atmosphere on Highway 66 began to change. The oppressive weight that had hung over the road for decades seemed to lift, and the ghostly hitchhiker was never seen again. Jack, Tom, and Sarah stood by the roadside one last time, reflecting on their journey. They had faced their fears and uncovered the truth, bringing justice to a restless spirit and peace to a haunted highway. "Do you think he's finally at rest?" Jack asked, gazing down the now peaceful stretch of road. Sarah nodded, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. "I think so. Daniel can finally move on, and so can we." As they walked away, the moon cast a gentle light over Highway 66, no longer a place of terror but a symbol of redemption and the enduring power of truth. The arrest of Frank Turner brought a brief respite to the town, but the haunting did not cease. Sightings of the ghostly hitchhiker continued, now more sporadic yet filled with an even deeper sense of malice. Jack, Tom, and Sarah realized their victory was incomplete. The justice served wasn't enough to quell the curse that bound Daniel's spirit to Highway 66. One night, as they gathered in Sarah's motel room, an atmosphere of grim determination settled over them. Sarah spread out a map of the highway, her finger tracing the route. "We missed something," she said. "Daniel's spirit won't rest until the entire story is told, until every aspect of his torment is revealed." Tom looked up from a stack of old newspapers. What do you suggest? Sarah took a deep breath. We need to confront the ghost directly, not just to seek justice, but to understand the full scope of his suffering. We must find out what truly anchors him here. Jack frowned, his mind racing. And how do we do that? He disappeared last time. What if we can't summon him again? Sarah's eyes met Jack's with a steely resolve. We need to perform the ritual again, but this time, we must be prepared to engage with him fully. We need to ensure we have a way to communicate and find out exactly what he needs to move on. Tom nodded, though his expression remained wary. It's risky, but we have no other choice. What do we need? Sarah began to list the items they would need. A stronger connection to Daniel's past, something deeply personal, something that held immense significance to him. We have the locket, but we need more. We need his diary or letters, something that contains his voice, his thoughts. Their search led them back to the Hawkins' abandoned farmhouse. After hours of searching through the dusty remains of a forgotten life, they found an old, weathered diary hidden beneath a floorboard. It was Daniel's, filled with entries about his life, his dreams, and the days leading up to his death. With the diary in hand, they returned to the site of the ritual. The night was dark and oppressive, the air thick with the weight of anticipation. They arranged the items carefully, adding the diary to the locket and the other mementos. Tom began the incantation, his voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at him. We call upon the spirit of Daniel Hawkins to reveal the cause of his unrest and show us how we might help him find peace. The temperature dropped sharply, and the familiar fog began to swirl around them. The ghostly figure of Daniel appeared once more, his presence more solid, more real than before. His eyes, filled with sorrow and rage, locked onto theirs. Why do you summon me again? Daniel's voice echoed, filled with a haunting resonance. Sarah stepped forward, holding the diary aloft. We want to understand, Daniel. We want to know everything that binds you here. Please, tell us what we need to do to help you find peace. Daniel's form flickered, his expression torn between anger and despair. I have shown you the injustice, yet my soul remains tormented by betrayal, by those I trusted. The foreman was but a part of it. There were others complicit in my death, and until they are revealed and punished, I cannot rest. Jack felt a surge of determination. Who are they, Daniel? Who else must be brought to justice? The ghost's form grew darker, more menacing. My own family, he whispered, his voice filled with bitterness. They knew. They allowed it to happen, for their own gain. My death was not just about the smuggling, but a deeper treachery. They must be exposed. A heavy silence fell over the group as they absorbed Daniel's words. Sarah's mind raced. We need to investigate his family, find the proof of their involvement. Only then can we bring the full truth to light. As the fog began to lift, Daniel's figure started to fade. You must hurry, he said, his voice echoing. My time grows short, and the darkness here grows stronger. Reveal the truth, and you shall set me free. With that, the ghostly hitchhiker vanished, leaving the trio alone on the desolate highway. They knew their task was far from over, but they had a new lead and a renewed sense of purpose. In the days that followed, they delved into the dark secrets of the Hawkins family, uncovering a web of lies and deceit that stretched back generations. The betrayal ran deep, intertwined with the construction of the highway and the town's history. The evidence they uncovered was damning, and they brought it to the authorities, ensuring that justice was served not just for Daniel, but for all those who had suffered because of the family's greed and treachery. Finally, the day came when the last of the guilty were arrested, their crimes exposed to the light of day. As the sun set over Highway 66, Jack, Tom, and Sarah stood together, feeling the weight of their journey lift. "Do you think it's over?" Tom asked, his voice tinged with hope. Sarah nodded, a sense of peace washing over her. "I believe so. Daniel can finally rest." Jack looked down the now peaceful stretch of road, a small smile forming on his lips. "We did it. We freed him." As they turned to leave, the moon cast a gentle light over Highway 66, no longer a place of terror but a testament to the power of truth and redemption. The ghostly hitchhiker was seen no more, his spirit finally at peace, and the highway returned to a quiet, unremarkable stretch of road, its dark past laid to rest at last. As summer turned to autumn, the air grew cooler, and the trees along Highway 66 began to shed their leaves. Despite their success in exposing the Hawkins family's dark secrets and bringing justice to Daniel's spirit, Jack, Tom, and Sarah felt a lingering unease. The ghostly hitchhiker hadn't been seen since their last encounter, but there was a sense that their journey was not yet complete. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was from a man named Michael, a local historian who had been following their investigation. He had discovered something unsettling about the final days of Daniel's life that hadn't been revealed before. "We need to meet," Michael said, his voice urgent. "There's something you need to see." They agreed to meet at a small, secluded diner just off Highway 66. Michael arrived with a worn leather journal and a stack of old letters. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he spread the documents across the table. "This journal belonged to Frank Turner," Michael explained. "It details the construction of the highway and the events leading up to Daniel's death. But there's more. These letters, they reveal a deeper conspiracy." As they read through the journal and letters, a horrifying realization dawned on them. Daniel's death wasn't just about the smuggling operation or family betrayal. It was part of a larger, more sinister plan involving powerful figures in the town, all working to cover up their illegal activities. Daniel had stumbled upon a secret so dangerous that it cost him his life. Sarah's face grew pale as she pieced together the information. Daniel's spirit wasn't just seeking justice for his murder. He wanted to expose the entire network of corruption that plagued this town. We've only scratched the surface. Tom clenched his fists, anger boiling within him. "We need to finish what we started. We need to take this information to the authorities and make sure every last one of them is brought to justice." Jack nodded in agreement, his resolve hardening. "But first, we need to confront Daniel one last time. We need to show him that we're committed to seeing this through, that his death won't be in vain." That night, they returned to the highway, the final pieces of the puzzle in hand. The air was thick with anticipation as they set up the ritual site once more, the moon casting an eerie glow over the desolate road. They placed Frank Turner's journal and the letters at the center, surrounded by the other personal items they had collected. Tom began the incantation, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "We call upon the spirit of Daniel Hawkins to reveal the final truth and guide us in our quest for justice. The temperature plummeted, and a familiar fog began to swirl around them. Daniel's ghostly figure emerged, more solid and present than ever before. His eyes were filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "You have done well," Daniel's voice echoed, "but there is still more to be revealed." Sarah stepped forward, holding up the journal and letters. "We know about the deeper conspiracy, Daniel. We're committed to exposing everyone involved. Please, tell us what we need to do to end this once and for all." The ghost's form flickered, his expression one of intense focus. "You must confront the remaining conspirators. They hold the final piece of the puzzle. Only then can the curse be lifted." With those words, Daniel's figure began to fade, but not before he added, "Thank you for believing in me, for fighting for justice." As the ghostly apparition vanished, the fog lifted, leaving the trio standing in the cool night air. They knew what they had to do. Armed with the new evidence, they set out to confront the remaining conspirators, determined to bring the entire network of corruption to light. The final ride was fraught with danger. They faced threats and intimidation, but their resolve never wavered. With the help of the authorities and the evidence they had gathered, they managed to expose the full extent of the conspiracy. One by one, the conspirators were arrested, their crimes laid bare for all to see. As the last of the guilty were brought to justice, the oppressive atmosphere that had long haunted Highway 66 began to lift. The road, once a symbol of fear and death, was now a testament to the power of truth and the resilience of those who sought it. Jack, Tom, and Sarah stood together on the now peaceful stretch of highway, the weight of their journey finally lifting. They had faced their fears, uncovered the darkest secrets, and brought peace to a tormented spirit. "Do you think Daniel's finally at rest?" Tom asked, his voice tinged with hope. Sarah nodded, a sense of peace washing over her. "I believe so. We've done everything we can. His story has been told and justice has been served." Jack looked down the now tranquil road, a small smile forming on his lips. "We did it. We freed him." As they turned to leave, the moon cast a gentle light over Highway 66, no longer a place of terror but a testament to the enduring power of truth and redemption. The ghostly hitchhiker was seen no more, his spirit finally at peace, and the highway returned to a quiet, unremarkable stretch of road, its dark past laid to rest at last. With the final conspirators brought to justice and the sinister network exposed, it seemed like the nightmare of Highway 66 was over. However, Jack, Tom, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. The ghostly hitchhiker's appearances had stopped, but an unsettling aura lingered in the air, as if the highway itself held one last secret. Their suspicions were confirmed when Sarah received an anonymous letter. It was written in a shaky hand, the words almost illegible. "You missed something. Daniel's death was part of a larger curse. Meet me at the old church on the outskirts of town tonight." Sarah showed the letter to Jack and Tom, their faces mirroring her confusion and concern. "Do you think this is real?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. Tom nodded slowly. "We've come this far. We can't ignore it now. If there's even a chance we missed something, we need to find out." That evening, they drove to the old church, a dilapidated building that had long been abandoned. The once grand structure was now a haunting silhouette against the darkening sky, its windows shattered and its doors hanging precariously on their hinges. As they stepped inside, the smell of mildew and decay filled their nostrils. The pews were covered in dust, and the air was thick with an oppressive silence. A figure emerged from the shadows, an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes and a weathered face. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice a whisper. "My name is Abigail. I was a friend of Daniel's family, and I know the true story of what happened to him." Jack stepped forward, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" "We've already exposed the corruption and brought the conspirators to justice." Abigail shook her head slowly. "You uncovered part of the truth, but not all of it. Daniel's death was not just a murder. It was the result of an ancient curse that has plagued this land for centuries. The highway was built over a sacred burial ground, and disturbing it awakened a vengeful spirit." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you saying Daniel's spirit is part of this curse?" "Yes," Abigail replied. "Daniel's soul was bound to the highway, cursed to wander until the true cause of his death was revealed. But the curse goes deeper. It is tied to the land itself, and until the burial ground is properly consecrated, the spirits will never rest." Tom frowned, his skepticism evident. "How do we do that? How do we consecrate the burial ground?" Abigail handed them an old leather-bound book. "This contains the ritual you need. It must be performed at midnight, under the full moon, at the exact location of the burial ground. You have until the next full moon to prepare." Determined to end the curse once and for all, the trio spent the next few weeks studying the ancient ritual. The instructions were intricate, requiring a series of specific actions and the use of sacred herbs and artifacts. They gathered everything they needed and waited for the night of the full moon. When the night finally arrived, they made their way to the designated spot, deep in the forest where the highway had been built. The air was thick with anticipation, the moon casting an ethereal glow over the clearing. They set up the ritual site, carefully arranging the artifacts and herbs according to the instructions. As midnight approached, they began the ritual, chanting the ancient words and making the necessary offerings. The air grew colder, and a thick fog rolled in, enveloping them in an otherworldly mist. They continued, their voices unwavering despite the growing sense of dread. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and ghostly figures began to emerge from the fog. These were the spirits of those who had been buried here, their faces twisted in anguish and sorrow. Among them was Daniel, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Sarah stepped forward, holding the book aloft. "We seek to consecrate this ground and bring peace to the restless spirits. We acknowledge the wrongs that have been done and ask for your forgiveness." The spirits seemed to listen, their forms flickering in the moonlight. Daniel's ghost stepped forward, his expression softening. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice echoing in the stillness, "for finally understanding." With a final chant, they completed the ritual, the fog lifting as the spirits began to fade. The oppressive chill that had hung over the clearing dissipated, replaced by a sense of calm and serenity. The burial ground had been consecrated, the curse finally lifted. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Jack, Tom, and Sarah stood together, the weight of their journey finally lifting. They had faced their fears, uncovered the deepest secrets, and brought peace to the restless spirits. "Do you think it's really over this time?" Tom asked, his voice tinged with hope. Sarah nodded, a sense of peace washing over her. "I believe so. We've done everything we can. The curse is lifted, and the spirits can finally rest. Jack looked around the now tranquil forest, a small smile forming on his lips. We did it. We freed them. As they made their way back to the car, the sun cast a gentle light over the clearing, no longer a place of terror, but a testament to the enduring power of truth and redemption. The highway, once haunted by the restless spirits of the past, was now a quiet, unremarkable stretch of road, its dark history laid to rest at last. The tranquility that settled over Highway 66 after the consecration of the burial ground was short-lived. A few days later, Jack, Tom, and Sarah were jolted from their hard-earned peace by a series of disturbing reports, accidents, sightings of ghostly apparitions, and inexplicable phenomena along the highway. It seemed the curse was not entirely lifted, and the true final confrontation awaited them. One evening, as they gathered in Sarah's motel room, the atmosphere was tense. They had faced so much already, but the lingering unrest suggested that their journey was not yet complete. "We missed something," Sarah said, frustration evident in her voice. "The ritual should have worked. There must be a final piece we're overlooking." Tom leaned against the wall, his brow furrowed in thought. What if the curse wasn't just about the burial ground? What if there's another element we haven't considered? Jack, who had been quietly staring out the window, turned to face them. "The spirits may be at rest, but the highway itself might still be cursed. We need to confront whatever is left head-on." Sarah's eyes lit up with a new resolve. "We need to take one last stand. Confront whatever is still haunting Highway 66. We need to drive the entire stretch of the highway, just like Daniel did, and face whatever comes our way." That night, under a dark, moonless sky, they prepared for their final journey. Armed with their determination and a deeper understanding of the curse, they set out on Highway 66, the haunted road that had dominated their lives for so long. The drive was uneventful at first, the silence of the night broken only by the hum of the engine. As they ventured further, an oppressive feeling settled over them, the air growing thick with tension. Shadows seemed to move just beyond the reach of their headlights, and a chilling wind whispered through the trees. Halfway down the highway, the temperature plummeted, and a thick fog enveloped the road. Jack tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the road ahead. "Stay alert. This is where things usually happen." Suddenly, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. Jack slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt. The ghostly hitchhiker stood before them, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and desperation. Sarah rolled down her window, her voice steady. "Daniel, we're here to end this. Tell us what we need to do." The ghost's form flickered, his expression pained. "You have done much, but there is still one more thing. The one who truly cursed this highway remains hidden. You must confront him to break the curse." Jack, Tom, and Sarah exchanged determined glances. "Who is it?" Tom asked, stepping out of the truck. Daniel pointed to the darkness beyond the fog. "He waits for you. Follow the path, and you will find him." With that, Daniel's ghost faded into the night, leaving them to face the final leg of their journey. They followed the narrow, winding path that led off the main highway, deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, and the sense of foreboding intensified. Eventually, they reached an old, dilapidated cabin. The windows were dark, and the air was thick with an unnatural silence. They approached cautiously, their senses heightened by the palpable tension. Inside the cabin was a chaotic mess of old furniture and forgotten memories. In the center of the room stood a figure, cloaked in shadows. As they stepped closer, the figure turned to face them, revealing a gaunt, hollow-eyed man. "I knew you would come," the man said, his voice a raspy whisper. "I am the one who cursed this highway, bound by an ancient pact to protect my secrets." Sarah stepped forward, her voice filled with resolve. "It's over. We've uncovered the truth and brought justice to those who suffered. Release the curse, or face the consequences." The man laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the cabin. "You think you can stop me? This curse is my legacy, my power." Jack, Tom, and Sarah exchanged determined glances. They knew what they had to do. With a collective resolve, they began reciting the incantation from the ancient book, their voices growing stronger with each word. The man screamed, a horrible, soul-piercing sound, as the power of the incantation took hold. The cabin shook, the walls cracking and the air filled with a blinding light. The curse, bound to the man's dark soul, began to unravel. As the light faded and the man crumbled to dust, the oppressive weight that had hung over them lifted. The cabin, the curse, and the lingering darkness vanished, leaving behind a serene, moonlit forest. Jack, Tom, and Sarah stood together, the weight of their journey finally lifting. They had faced their fears, uncovered the darkest secrets, and brought peace to the restless spirits of Highway 66. "Do you think it's really over this time?" Tom asked, his voice tinged with hope. Sarah nodded, a sense of peace washing over her. "I believe so. The true source of the curse is gone, and the spirits can finally rest." Jack looked around the now tranquil forest, a small smile forming on his lips. "We did it. We freed them." As they made their way back to the car, the sun began to rise, casting a gentle light over the clearing. Highway 66, once a place of terror, was now a quiet, unremarkable stretch of road, its dark past laid to rest at last. The ghostly hitchhiker was seen no more, his spirit finally at peace, and the highway returned to a state of serene normalcy, a testament to the enduring power of truth and redemption.